In the last section, we spoke about some big issues that kind of came up as we were going through a single container deployment. In this section, we're going to start talking about the application that we're going to make to give you more experience on building a multi-container application. So one application that uses many different containers or many different services to achieve whatever its goal is. Now, to show you what we're going to build, I want to first give you a very quick overview on a side topic. So this right here is a diagram of the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence is a sort of computer science topic. You'll see this very commonly come up in computer science or programming interviews. The Fibonacci sequence is a series of numbers. So the sequence goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. So it continues on much further than this. Any value or any index inside the Fibonacci sequence can be calculated by taking the previous two values and adding them together. So for example, to calculate this value right here, we would look at the previous two values of 1 and 2. If you add together 1 and 2, that gives you 3. And so that gives us the next value in the sequence. Then to calculate the next value, we would do 2 plus 3, add those together, and you get 5. The next value would be 3 plus 5, that gives you 8. 5 plus 8 gives you 13, 8 plus 13 gives you 21, and so on. In a computer science or a programming interview, a very common question that you might get is, write a function that calculates the Fibonacci value at a particular index. So for example, if I asked you to give me the index, or the value of the Fibonacci sequence at index 7, you would have to calculate the number 21. And if I asked you to give me the value at index 5, you would need to calculate 8, and so on. So the application that you and I are going to be making is essentially going to be a fancy Fibonacci sequence calculator. And we're going to build this in a just absolutely over-the-top complicated fashion. You could absolutely build a function like just 3 or 4 lines of code that will calculate any number in the Fibonacci sequence. But again, to give you an example of a multi-container deployment, we're going to make a crazy, over-the-top, way overcomplicated version of a Fibonacci calculator, just to give you more experience with a multi-container deployment. All right, so let's take a look at the mockup for our application. All right, so here's the app right here. We're going to present the user with a little form at the top that's going to ask them what index they want us to calculate. So for example, a user might enter in right here 7, and then they would click on Submit. When the user clicks on Submit, we're going to take that index, and then we're going to have some backend processes or some servers that's going to calculate the Fibonacci value at index 7. And so eventually, our application for index 7 would need to calculate out the value 21. After the user submits that number right there, we would add the number 7 onto this list of indices that our application has seen. So I would expect to see 7 added on there. And then we should eventually also calculate the appropriate value for index 7. And so eventually I should see some line entry here of, for index 7, I calculated 21, like so. All right, so that's the application, essentially a fancy Fibonacci calculator. And again, we're going to make this just over the top complicated, way more complicated than it needs to be, to give you a good example of a multi-container deployment. Now, the reason that we're doing a Fibonacci calculator here, as opposed to like a blog or like a Twitter application or something like that, is that I didn't want you to have to focus on the actual application implementation details. I didn't want you to have to worry about learning JavaScript or learning authentication or any of that stuff. And I just wanted you to be able to focus 100% on the Docker and deployment side of things. And so that's why we are using a rather kind of simplistic topic here as a subject of our application. Now, let's take a quick pause right here. Now that we've got a better idea of the application that we're going to make, we'll come back to the next section and we'll start talking about the overall architecture of this application. So another quick break and I'll see you in just a moment.